Now this structure is not a cage, it is a squash tunnel. We're going to use it as a gourd tunnel, and by gourds I mean we grow Southeast Asian gourds, so long sponge gourds. I just think they're better than zucchini. Some birdhouse gourds. Let's see what else we have here. I can't even read what this one says. But these are basically all edible gourds. They're not ornamental gourds. Although certainly some could be, like the bushel gourd, could be ornamental. Most of these Southeast Asian gourds, you pick when they're immature. So if you go to a large Asian market, you'll find these really exotic looking gourds that look like zucchini, let's say. Taste very similar to zucchini, but far more flavor. We're really addicted to them. So I grow them on gourd tunnels like this. And on behind you, there's a gourd tunnel that runs about 35 feet that we built. It looks ornamental, but it's fantastic when it's just dripping with edible gourds. It's warm enough now to plant runner beans. Now these I started in pots, which absolutely isn't necessary in most of the US. But I like to have an early crop and give something a head start if I can. But I'll also be planting seeds in about, well, maybe the end of this week, now that the soil's getting warm. It's been cool here in New England, so we're getting our first rains finally, and our first 90-degree days are coming this week. So typically Memorial Day is when we plant tomatoes, basil, squashes. You can see I'm planting squashes into the garden. But beans, they like it warm and they like rich soil. This soil is so rich. We just tilled it over, and we have to till back here with a rototiller because this is our back 40 and we have like a quarter acre of vegetable garden to plant. But this soil is very rich from, guess what, the turkeys. We dump all the coop manure here in the winter, and as the snow melts, we turned it all in, and there's straw and hay with it, and we don't have to do much else for fertility here. I even use the same compost in the soil. I mix it with potting soil. But you can see this gives these runner beans a head start. Now, as I said, this isn't necessary, but for those of us who are impatient, it's fun to have an early crop of beans. And then when the main crop comes in mid-July, and you know how beans come in, they come in by the bucketful, you sort of stretched out the season. Now here, between the garlic over there and the gooseberries here, I fit in a row of sweet peas I'm growing on bird netting. Now, sometimes this is sold as plastic chicken wire, but these sweet pea plants were pinched when they first emerged, as I do with all sweet peas. But what happens is, with any sweet pea plant, is the side shoots that come out are much stronger, sometimes 2 or 3 times stronger than the actual sweet pea plant would be if you never pinched it. Now, I've proven this over and over again. People don't believe me, but I urge you to try it and see what happens. Don't be afraid to pinch. Believe me, sweet peas will start growing with 5, 10, a dozen branches from the bottom. Now, this time of year, again early June, they're really starting to take off. And these are sweet peas that I will let grow like crazy at this point. This netting is 8 to 10 feet high, and these will start blooming at about 3-4 feet high, depending on nighttime temperatures. And let's say by around the 4th of July, I'll be picking armloads of sweet peas. I wanted to show you sweet peas in the perennial border. A lot of people ask me about sweet peas in a perennial border, and they work very well if you plant them on a teepee, and not just a teepee with canes, but a teepee with netting on it. So either netting or twigs or branches, because that's how sweet peas grow in the wild. The Lathyrus odoratus in the wild grows on shrubby growth, covers it. So if you plant these on a tutor or a trellis, they're probably not going to climb up. They have tendrils, so they're not climbers that tend to twine. They are climbers that want to grab onto very fine stems with their tendrils. Now, I showed you sweet peas before growing in the perennial border. These are being grown in a very traditional method, the way in the United Kingdom, people who exhibit sweet peas in Sweet Pea Society shows grow their sweet peas. Now, this is called a cordon, or an English cordon method. And what I've done is I've restricted all the growth in the sweet pea to just one stem. Now, these were planted in 2 weeks ago. They're already starting to get much larger than the ones that are growing with multi-stems in the garden. And what I'll do is continue to cut off these tendrils because they will reach out and grab onto neighboring flowers that are emerging. Now, these are still small, but I guarantee in 2 weeks, the foliage will be that round in diameter because all that growth is restricted to just one stem. And in about 3.5, 4 weeks, flower buds will start emerging, and they can extend up to 12, 18 inches even with a flower stem. And that's what exhibitors want. They want 2-inch flowers on 14-inch stems, and it's kind of what I want too. Now, granted, this is a lot of work, but it's the kind of fiddly work I like doing in the garden. I've been growing sweet peas this way since the mid-'80s when I was a teenager, and I still do it. I always put in a few rows of English cordons. I grow some on branches and netting without pinching. Well, you always pinch, but without pinching after, let's say, 4 or 5 weeks in the ground. These I pinch off all the extra growth except that one stem. Now I wanted to show you lettuce that I grow for the kitchen. We eat a lot of salads around here, and I'm really addicted to these elevated cedar beds. This is not essentially a raised bed, it is an elevated bed. You can see it has metal legs, and it's about 1.5 feet deep. And we fill these with a really high quality potting soil every year because you can't reuse potting soil. And in it I plant lettuce seedlings. Now we've been picking it, as you can see, but these are full-size plants. Now I made a mistake here for visual purposes. I planted all my lettuce at the same time, which means we're getting about, I don't know, 6 heads a day, which is a lot. So we're sharing it with neighbors. But the size of these heads are massive. This is a red iceberg, fantastic. You can see how crunchy that is in the rain. And then we have some red sales lettuce. I even have some mint and dill I threw in just so we have sort of a composite salad. Excuse the mess on the deck. It's still planting time here. Another good thing about lettuce in containers, dogs don't pee on it, right? Look at this beautiful head of Freckles, which is a Boston lettuce. This is coming right into the kitchen with me. Now, so many people struggle with delphiniums, but I want to show you my delphiniums. You remember last year I had these fantastic, I mean, these things were, I don't know, they were at least 12 feet tall because the greenhouse is 16 feet tall. Now, staking is key. This is my sweet spot, right, for delphiniums. So this is, I don't know why, but the soil's really soft and rich, and they seem to love it. And what delphiniums love is really unique. They love to have a dry crown, that's the base of the plant, but then the foliage forms like a rain shadow that helps keep the crown dry. But then out from that extend feeder roots that want moisture. So, and they also enjoy breezes because these are essentially alpine plants. At this time of year, there are still gaps in the border, and the soil is soft enough where I can dig down and set in lupin seedlings like this and scatter them around like a matrix. So this way, deep into mulch right up to the edge of the crown, and this will form a nice plant, and by next spring, be covered in blooms. This is the time of year you want to start adding more plants into your perennial borders. These are snapdragons that I started in February. You can see they've been pinched. Now, when you buy snapdragons at a garden center, and they're fine, they're going to look more like these here, with one tall stem. If that's what you want, fine. But in a border, I like a cloud of flowers. So if you pinch them back, grow your own without growth regulators. And let's see, this should have a great root system. And then set these in gaps if you want, but I like to plant them in groups of 7, 14, so you get a huge mass of color. It's a very English way of growing things. This is also the time of year I start adding in the dahlias that I started indoors and then eventually in the greenhouse and then out on the deck, because this is a very densely planted border. And what happens with dahlias is if you set the tubers in the ground, they'll grow, but you tend to get a weak stem and you don't get a bushy plant. Most of us know to actually to take a dahlia and then pinch it. But growing it in a pot for about a month or even 2 and setting it into the garden in June or even early July will give it a good head start. And that way, and this is the Bishop of Langdaff, so it's a dark red single with red foliage. That way it will not have a lot of competition and grow up and be something much more substantial in the garden.